now that we've been having this conversation about debt, odious debt, not odious debt, and all of that, so what happens after? How do we move this conversation from our current debt situation to probably future debt situations? Kags, the executive director of the Open Institute, is our guest this morning, and we're going to have that conversation with him. Al, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you here again.
I'm so excited to be here. Do you know this is the first time I'm on radio in 10 years? Yes. Apart from the virtual live that we did, this is the first time I'm in studio.
That was in radio as well.
Yes, but that didn't count for me.
Okay.
Being in studio is what counts. And the last time I was on Kiss 100, and that was 10 years ago.
And what were you discussing?
I don't even remember what we were talking about in those days. But the fact that, I'm back here, I'm really excited and I'm really happy. And I was telling you this morning that you're very special because you brought me out to the rural areas to come and sit here and talk about this big, bad monster called debt.
It's a big one, eh?
It's a big one.
Okay. Let's talk about a big proverb from a small country. City.
Yes.
This week, where are we heading?
The kingdom. We're in the southern part of Africa. The kingdom of, it's written, they used to call it Swaziland, and the current name is written as Swatini, but it isn't pronounced that way.
How do they pronounce it?
Swatini.
So the E is silent.
I'm not sure whether the E is silent or they just added an S to it. When you hear me whispering, it's because I'm not very clear how to pronounce it. And I'm pronouncing it deliberately so that,
So it's written Eswatini, but it's not pronounced Eswatini.
No. The S, you start with S, not E.
Swatini.
Yes.
Swali.
Okay. A man who prides himself on his ancestry is like the potato plant. The best part is underground.
A man who prides in his ancestry is like the potato plant. The best part is?
Underground.
Kags, what's your interpretation of this proverb?
Our most solid part of our lives is our history. Is the people who brought us to where we are right now. Unfortunately, that makes me really worried.
Why?
Because it means that if this is history 20 years from now, boy, are we doing a bad job of it.
We're the potato of the future.
We are the potato of the future, which means our grandkids are going to be in trouble.
They'll be looking at us and wondering, oh my goodness.
What did you guys do?
Yeah.
What were we doing? And sometimes, you see, one of the things that I've been very interested in has been the history of Kenya. And I've mostly been interested in the history of our people, those who are not politicians. Just how did they survive in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s? And when you really think about it, these people suffered and they lived very hard lives so that today we can live a better life. And I went to Turkana recently to interview an old man who was about 96. And he doesn't live in Turkana town. He lives way out. And when I got to his place and I was driving a Land Rover, he said, this is the reason why I fought for independence, because we would never have been seen driving a Land Rover unless it was owned by someone else who was white. There was no chance in hell of a person like you, as dark as you, driving a car like that freely and going from county to county without a problem. When I think about what that means for us, it means that we have to be purveyors of prosperity for the next generation. We need to be doing a much better job. We really are not.
What makes you say so? What is it that we are doing today that you think our future generations will look back and think, these people must have been lunatics?
Well, I think that if you just look at just this one conversation that you guys have been running for the last, I don't know how many weeks, months, about this debt situation, it is in our plans to borrow more. We have borrowed 2.something trillion so far, and we are not stopped. Next year, we'll have borrowed double that. And when you listen to the economists, you're seeing that there's one particular thing that we're not doing well, which is that we are not tying ourselves to Chapter 12 of the Constitution anymore. That one we just threw out the window and forgot about it. And so when you think about the challenges that all of this debt is portending for actual human beings outside of Nairobi, because sometimes we think of Nairobi as Kenya, but Nairobi is in Kenya. Where I live, in the county that I live in, there is a woman who started bearing children at 13, who is now 35, does not have an ID card, has 10 to 12 children, and earns 300 shillings a day.
The firstborn is 22 years old.
The firstborn is 22 years old.
Of course, the firstborn doesn't have an ID as well.
She does not have an ID and rides a boda, but also makes about 200 bob. Chances are really high that that 22-year-old has a wife and already 2 or 3 children. Dropped out of school in standard 3. In 2020, when I was moving into Kilifi County, I went and met with 900 women over that period. They meet in these things called chamas, or they meet, they're called table banking groups. They meet every Friday or every Thursday, one of those days. And so I went to meet them, and I would ask them very basic questions. How many kids do you have? How long have you been married? How far did you go to school? Out of 900 women, 680 dropped out at standard 2.
2.
Why did they drop out?
Various reasons. First of all, they started late, so by the time they were in standard 2, they were 13 years old. Many of them got pregnant. Almost all of them, there was no money to keep them in school anyway. In almost all instances, the schools that we're talking about are made of mud, don't have real desks, don't have books. There's no real reason.
Some don't even have doors and windows.
Right. So there's no real reason to stay in school. School was really a daycare at the very beginning. These women that we're talking about are living a life where they're trying to feed these children, and many of them have land. That those families have land. You'll find that they have. You guys have been seeing on some of these, especially Gekuyu stations. You hear Maguta.
Yeah.
All the land that you're hearing is available in Malindi is being sold by these families, who this is their last straw. Tourism died, so it cannot fend for their children anymore. Then they went back to shags and they started cutting down trees for charcoal. They've cleared whole woodlands. And now, what do they have to do with this land? They don't farm. To put a borehole in a lot of that land is more than 2 million shillings. Who is going to go all the way to the community borehole to go and fetch water so that we can come and pour it into the ground so that we can grow something? So we grow hungry. This is actually real situations. Now, when you think about the fact that we are borrowing, and then it's going into general support of the budget, and then we use that money to refurbish State House, or we use that money so that we can do this NADCO report. No, not just the report. We've got bills in there.
9.
Now we've created new offices, right? Yep. These new offices are going to have staff, and these staff are going to need to be remunerated extremely well. All of these things are going to be happening at a time when we accept that more than 70% of Kenyans live in rural areas. And the further away you are from the center, whichever center that is, the further away you are from any government services that you can speak of, the further away you are from opportunities. Last December, the community that I work in, because I work in a co-working space that we created in Malindi called Maono. And it is a community of change makers, this community-based organizations, thespians, actors, that sort of thing. Last year, that group went and mapped out all of Kilifi's health and education facilities. The biggest thing that was found is that, yes, as you would expect, many of those facilities have no doctors, many of those facilities have no equipment. There are facilities where there's a maternity room, but that's where the doctor lives. Because we built the facility and then we forgot to provide for where the doctor will live. So if a woman comes to give birth, then he has to organize himself a little bit.
Create space
in his what is now his house. Room. Using that bed, which he probably uses. She gives birth, she finishes, and he tries to get her out of here as quickly as possible.
Okay, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
so that he can go
Is this
back
a true
home.
story?
This is a true story.
Please just, sorry. I
Yes.
usually need some kind of clarification
Please
so
do.
that then my chagrin can now be well-founded.
Yes.
This is not an imagined situation where we're talking about this is what would happen because we've not built the quarters for a doctor, or this is real
This is a real place.
today.
In 2024, January, this is a real place where the medical officer actually lives in a maternity ward. He needs to get that woman to leave as quickly as possible so that he goes back home.
Okay, so allow me to ask this question. A lot of times when we talk about a number of these things and looking at what priorities should be nationhood, and I often say that the face of a nation or the state of a nation is the condition of its most vulnerable or
Yes.
its individual.
Yes.
Not community,
Yes.
not family,
Yes.
individual. If
Yes.
you have one person among millions who suffers to an extent not within their own making, that's the face of the nation.
Yes.
That because that one is what now taints the rest of the image. So that is the situation we look at. So oftentimes when we have the finger and we start naming things and we talk about the health system being in a mess, education is going to the dogs, economy is in the doldrums, then we are not actually being sensationalist, are we?
I can tell you this. 80% of the time I listen here on this station, on TV or whatever, I listen to people talking about the state of the nation and talk about the state of health. I have recently learned that we don't know what we're talking about. I challenge anyone to leave this beautiful county of Nairobi, ignoring the fact that there are slums and there are what you call low-income neighborhoods and people are suffering.
Informal settlements.
Informal settlement and so on. And take a drive 2 hours outside of Nairobi,
In any direction.
or take a flight to Kilifi, then don't stop there. Don't go to Malindi. Land at the Malindi International Airport. Take a car and drive 2 hours
Which direction?
in whichever direction you choose.
As
Just
long
make
as
sure
you'll still be within Kilifi County.
you'll be in Kilifi County. In fact, if you drive 4 hours, you'll still be in Kilifi County. Go even as far as the next county over, which is Tana River, or the next county over, which is Garissa, and just look at the state of human beings' lives. Look at what people are living when we're talking about, we really need to prioritize water and sanitation.
Yeah.
Honestly, we have no idea what we're talking about. We have no idea that there are children in 2024 who wake up in the morning early, going to school, have to pass by the woods so that they can fetch firewood and the girls can fetch water, which they go with to school, or they don't. They go back home with it and then go to school, which means they're definitely going to be late.
Yep.
And we're expecting that these children are going to be competing. They're going to be competing with these ones who are here in Nairobi at Kimathi Primary School, even at Kibera's schools. Olympic. Really. It is a dire situation that we're living here. And unfortunately, 70% plus of Kenyans live in rural areas. The point that I need you to remember, if you remember nothing else I have said today, is the further away you get from the nearest town, the further away you are from any service. That woman I was telling you who does not have an ID, the reason she doesn't have an ID is that she has to take transport and pay 200 shillings. Remember how much I told you she earns? Each way to go to town, to go to that place where she's going to be told, umekuja na photocopy ya ID ya baba yako. She didn't know she was supposed to come up with this photocopy. Then she has to go back home and plan another trip back. What are the chances she does that on 300 bob a day?
She's going to go.
Now, here's the worst thing that you need to know, City. Many women die in Kilifi County, not because of the unavailability of the health facilities, but because oftentimes it is near impossible to get to the facility. So I live in Changoto. The nearest facility is in Adu. I have to get on a motorbike at 9 months pregnancy to be shaken up on a road that really is not even a Maram road. And worse, if it was like when we were trying to collect that data in December, when it has rained, there are places where she has to get off the motorbike and cross the flooded riverbed, while the piki guy is holding it up. True story, honestly.
Holding what up?
The
Piki. The motorbike. You have to hold it up.
And the woman has
So
to
that
wade across
you
the
can't
river.
drive it into the water. You have to carry it. So you carry it along while she makes do, or somebody is helping her along. Get to the other side. She gets onto the motorbike and they're slipping and sliding. What are the chances of the miscarriage?
Well, close to 100%.
Yes.
So the better option is
And
just
what
give birth at home.
happens, so that you know that this is mostly not reported, is that if this child dies near that river, why should we bother continuing?
Just go back.
We just go back.
Yep.
We don't even bother to tell the chief that it's happened again.
Yep.
If you meet the chiefs of those places, they're so jaded because they have seen so much that. And meanwhile, we're talking about the fact that we are needing to borrow 2.5 so that it does general support, so that it pays salaries. Are we serious?
Yes, we are.
I was looking on, you guys have talked about a lot of stories. I was looking on Twitter the other day, and there's a wonderful person who decided to tell us about why the Lake Turkana wind project failed. And I was amazed. We are talking about a KPLC that last year posted, this year posted 319 million in net profit.
Yep. Half year
profit. While we are encountering load shedding and blackouts and all this as the order of the day, that even presidential functions encounter blackouts in the middle of speeches, right? What are we doing having a KPLC giving us profits? What are those profits for? When you really ask yourself these questions. And so when our grandchildren are going to be looking at us in the future and seeing that we have a country that is lagging so far behind where energy is concerned, whereas there are some wind turbines up in Lake Turkana whose energy we cannot ferry because we just didn't complete an electricity line. Really, what are we talking about?
It was a whole complete disaster.
All down, yes.
Because we all saw it. Lake Turkana wind power project started. Everybody knew it. I was driving on Mombasa Road every morning for many months, and you'd see those turbines being transported from Mombasa through Mombasa Road.
Yes.
They're put somewhere at some yard on Eastern Bypass. Then they are transported from here to Loyangalani,
Yes.
over 500 kilometers away. Everybody knows. Many of them went up. They were then installed. They switched on. They tested. Stima iko bzz, 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 stima imeingia. And then they tell Kenya Power, now we are ready to give you power. Kenya Power is like, we are ready to receive power. But the guy who's supposed to do the connection for us is Ketraco. Ketraco mko wapi? Sasa unajua tulikuwa tunangoja huyu jamaa atengeneza hiyo evacuation line ajatengeneza. That's always going to be a story that you'll ask yourself very many questions.
So what
Let's
our
take a
children
break,
are going to read is that we paid.
We
out
had to
of
pay
that,
so many
we
months
paid 14 billion shillings
for power that was being generated.
for power that was being,
consumed.
but we are paying 8.5 billion every year for power that we are not consuming until that evacuation line has been finished.
It's 7:30. Kenya's biggest conversation is hosting Kags. He is the executive director of the Open Institute. We're talking about the next steps. We have had a conversation about our national debt for a long time. Now he says, let's look at the next conversation that we should be having regarding this debt. Keep it here. We'll be back shortly. Let's take this break. Take a look at the weather and traffic. The executive director of the Open Institute. So how then would you like to phrase the conversation on debt?
So I think there's a couple of things that we, in my view, must do.
Okay.
Number one, let us begin calling spades spades. Let's stop calling them gilded spoons, golden, and other things. The challenge that currently exists, according to Treasury, is that 67% of GDP is being spent on debt.
Maybe more.
Do we know
7%
what that means?
Of revenues.
Does your brother in the village know what that means?
No.
So Kenyans right now do not know what the issues are. The contracts that were done for the SGR, for Aror Kimwarer, for that wind turbine project that we were just talking about, all of these things are not public. So we all can speculate and maybe listen to Jimmy Wanjigi as he tells us what he knows, but we haven't seen these documents, so we don't really know. We need to know. Number two, our president has told us that he spends 7.2 shillings on debt and 3 shillings on
Everything else.
But are we living like a country that is in dire straits?
No.
When you really think about it, we're not living like a country that is in trouble. If you think about your own house, which is how Kenyans would understand it. So you have debt from KCB, your SACCO has given you a loan, you are almost defaulting. You have gone all the way down to Fuliza, to Tala, and all these other guys. You have gotten to a place
To the
where
local kiosk.
you are borrowing even from Mamamboga. Now, if you're in that particular situation, is that the time to buy a new car?
No.
No.
But that's what we're doing, right? So that we can say that we're doing development. When there are government officials who have not been paid salaries in months, we are talking about this. At what point do we begin to get serious? Now, when I ask myself where the blame must go, I realized that the blame must go to our representatives in Parliament. Because they allowed for Parliament to become a department of the government, and not just in this administration, even in the previous one.
Yeah.
They allowed themselves to become a department that can be called into a meeting in Naivasha and told, this is how you guys shall legislate. This is what your agenda shall be. And they allowed themselves to be so partisan that the truth is Kenyans don't have a say. Now, those two combinations are really dangerous, because now we who elected these people, who don't live in Nairobi, I've just described to you, who dropped out of school in standard 3, who are struggling day in, day out to make 300 bob,
Who are in the majority.
who are in the vast majority, are supposed to hold these buggers into account. And they don't ever come home. How do we hold them into account if we don't know what they're doing?
Right.
How do we hold them into account if when we open our TV, the president tells us we are now in debt distress? What does out of debt distress mean? What should it actually mean? Debt distress should actually mean that to some extent we are producing something. To some extent there is employment, and not that housing project. That there is actual jobs for everyone. And without the justification that is saying that kazi ni kazi, we have to now get serious about these things. One of the things that this government has found itself, and I think we have to depoliticize the situation you're in. It's not about Kini Kwanza and about Azimio. The fact of the matter is, if Azimio was here, they would be facing the exact same challenges.
Yep.
They would still be needing to pay that Eurobond that was taken in 2014.
Yep.
And they need to pay it now, right? So that's not a partisan issue. They might have decided to do one or two things differently, but they really, when you really think about it, are not going to be far off.
The wiggle room
It's very little.
little.
They still would have had to dance to the tune of our friends at the IMF.
Yeah.
We are slaves. Let's call ourselves slaves. Let's talk about how we free ourselves into slavery. In my mind, we have to decide on how to renegotiate our debt situation. We have to get to a place, if we are talking about debts that we can prove that are odious, then we must hold some people to account. For us to be able to do that, those documents must come public.
So you're saying for us to call a spade, we must put the spade here
Right in front of everybody.
and look at it.
And look at it and
see,
agree that,
does
yeah,
it-
anyway,
Does it actually form to conform to all the characteristics of what forms a spade?
Yes.
Does it have, the shape of a spade of the beginning? Does it have the shape of a spade at the end? Does it have a handle? Is it a spade?
Yes.
Then we all say it's a spade.
Yes.
Right now we are discussing something that we can't see. We're just seeing bits of it.
It's like when I started texting you about this issue.
Yeah.
I was getting very tired because of the fact that we are really analyzing this, how we got here. And we've analyzed this so thoroughly. I have seen so much analysis. I have even traveled here to Nairobi to go into some fancy hotels and listen to some pundits tell us some really grim stories and really analyze. But you know what? We say that the SGR was overpaid by double or triple. Says who? Where did the money go? We say that there was a subscription fee that was supposed to be 10%, but we upped it just because we could to a 40%. Okay, fine. Can we track that money? Can we see that money? Can we see exactly how much has actually come into this country? Can we put that against this SGR and say, okay, ESGR imetusaidia. This expressway here helped me to get here in 5 minutes. I don't know whether it was value for money because I've never seen the contracts that are involved with this. And Kenyans can read. Even those ones who dropped out of school
Even that
have
they can read.
community-based organizations that will read and will break it down for them and they will understand. So that they can be able to go to the Malindi MP and say, when you go back and you hear something like raise debt ceiling, tukuone ukiraise. Jaribu. But the fact that they do not have an understanding of all of these things that are going on, it becomes very difficult.
Are you talking about civic education then?
I'm talking about civic education, which unfortunately we only do once every 5 years.
Yeah, we do voter education.
Right, we do voter education. We go and even within our non-profits, we do civic education at the end.
Yep.
So this is a young person who you're not telling to go and collect an ID card at the very last minute, to go and get their voter's card at the very last minute. And this is a person who's supposed to vote correctly.
So civic education is not something that should be a one-time thing.
It shouldn't.
We're talking about a continuous process of insistent and deliberate education, because all these times that we keep, even we've heard it and it has become almost buzzword sometimes.
Yes.
Leaders will say, well, you are the ones who voted us in, then we should be held to account. But essentially what we're saying here is that if I don't share something with you, the likelihood of me knowing that if you knew,
Yes.
I would not be in this position. It puts me in a particularly sweet position, doesn't it?
It does. And you see, we must keep our people busy. So every time there's an accountability issue, we say it is our people who are being targeted, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
We then make sure that it goes into court, and somehow we don't know what happens. Then after a few years, when we are supposed to have forgotten about it, well, you're released. And we say that Latif is now acquitted because there was no evidence. The fact that there was no evidence doesn't mean that Latif didn't steal, right? But who are we to say anything about it now? The other thing about calling spades is that we need to agree that Parliament has to start doing its job.
Allow me to just disagree with you right there.
Yes.
No, that agreement won't work.
We can't get them to do their job?
No. I'm saying no for the fifth time,
But we are paying them 1 million shillings.
Yes. The no here is not that I'm disagreeing with the principle of the uselessness of members of Parliament. There we're in complete agreement there.
Yes.
The no is because we cannot begin a statement that relates to members of Parliament with a prescription that we must, because that is the stock narrative and it hasn't worked. We must begin with a completely different story, and the story has to be with a question. How do we get rid of our MPs, or how do we ensure that these people actually get to do what they are supposed to do, because they won't?
But we have precedent.
Well, like when?
In 2011, Kenya was the first country to release open data to the public. First country in sub-Saharan Africa. One of the data sets that was released was CDF. What happened was that a number of civil society organizations went to the ground in Western Kenya and wanted to see where some of these projects were. I think it was Kakamega or maybe Bungoma. I'm not sure which of the two.
Or maybe Busia.
I think it was actually one of the two. They went to this place. It was the National Taxpayers Association at this time. They went and saw some villagers and said, we've come to see X school that was funded by the MPs. And they could not understand why the locals were so amused. So they were told, let's go. And they were taken to a beautiful field, nice and green. And they're told, voila.
Here's your school.
There's the school. Okay? That same period, we saw an MCA who had spent 10 million shillings of whatever the word fund is to build public toilets that were actually 4 in number and that were pit latrines. 10 million.
Did they exist?
They existed.
They were pit latrines.
They were pit latrines.
They cost 10 million
They
shillings.
cost 10 million shillings.
How deep were they?
250,000 a pop.
This is what I need you.
Maybe they're a
2.5
kilometer
million.
5 million for one.
No, they also had maybe gilded,
Maybe they're a kilometer deep. You have
Something.
to think. I mean,
We have to think.
Yeah.
So citizens from that area, when they learnt this, now I want to pause there and say something. The truth that we have found as the Open Institute, we did some research and we found all 4 of us and all other 50 million Kenyans, they care more about what is happening at home, in their commute and at work than they care about the 17 billion shillings that we might talk about, whatever we are talking about.
Why is that
Yes,
so?
sir.
Why is that so?
Because of the fact that this one they understand. So
Really?
there's a woman
You
who said
relate
to us,
to this.
You relate to it.
I relate to it. Look, there's a woman who said to me, I've never touched 1 million shillings. How am I ever going to understand what you're talking about when you're talking about billion?
But now this is my thing, Al.
Yeah.
And that's why I always insist.
Yes.
People always say, well, why do we have to keep talking about the things that are not working? And I say, if you do not,
Yeah.
then you cannot make the connect between what is not working and what should be working. So, in your house, when at that time you're 9 months pregnant and you're trying to make it across the river to a hospital that does not exist, right? In that moment, your reality is the 100 shillings that you
Yes.
have, that you're going to pay half of it to the border guy,
Yes.
and the other half you're going to hold on to it and hope that maybe you buy a packet of milk for strength after you've delivered your baby.
Right.
That's your reality. You relate to that. In
Yes.
that moment, you care about it.
Yes.
But then what we are maybe even calling actualization is when you realize that, okay, 17 billion shillings in Kenya today would mean that I, as a woman who is giving birth at 9 months, does not have to get on the slippery slope with this border and go to a hospital that maybe does not exist. If it was applied in the right way, would that then become, and that my question after that whole narrative is, does that then become more relatable if you are able to connect with what is not happening and what should be happening?
If
Here's
the thing, I have 12 children. I dropped out of school at standard 3. My wife dropped out of school at standard 2 because I made her pregnant. She was 13, I was 17. I need to feed all these mouths.
All 13 of them.
All 13 of them.
Right.
On 300 bob. Already as it is, even for you guys who are thumbed, when you hear this story of mathematics, your eyes kind of glaze over. You're telling me, who dropped out of standard 3, that I will understand what you're talking about when you say billion? Aki does not work. It does not work.
So how should you have a conversation with that person so that they see?
So before I go into how I want to have a conversation with that person, I want to go back to what you were saying, that we cannot get our MPs to do. There's precedent. The MCA who built those toilets, this is what happened. People understand how much it is to do pit latrines in their homes.
Yep.
So if you tell me you did 4, all I do is I think back to my 1.
how much did I do one for?
Right? So I did 1 for 40,000
I
or
called so and so
400,000.
wakakuja wakachimba wiki mbili hapa.
40,000 ni nyingi baba.
All right? I've done mine 40,000. You've done yours 10 million. I want to know why. When they eventually went into some detail, because now that's something they can understand and they can push.
Yep.
When they went into some detail, what they did is that they found that some of that money went into a benchmarking trip to Singapore.
For the pit latrines.
Yeah, so that we understand how, to build the best
sanitation.
We want to
Global
understand
standards.
Global standards for people.
global standards. And then after that, there was some money to go and review the report in Mombasa and so on and so forth. By the time, we get to the
we needed
period.
a car.
And we needed cars. We needed a few things to be done.
Got it.
And a committee.
Right, and the committee and committees are working very hard. You said they were working hard. They're working hard.
I never said
They are working hard, Bona, these people. Let me tell you, these people are spending sleepless 2 hours of a week to be able to deliberate, because they don't just talk, they deliberate on these issues. Now, when they have done that, when the citizens understood that, what they did is that they made it impossible for MCA to go home to his mother's house. They just made it impossible. He comes with his car, it is stoned and sent back. He comes with another car, the neighborhood hears that he is at his mother's house, they go into his mother's house and says, excuse, leave.
Get out.
Until he made good, and he did make good. I think that story was actually told in this Standard.
How many such stories do we get?
So that's the thing. This past year, I saw in April, I saw a community in Gede during the public participation tell the Kilifi County official who had come that we don't want to hear many stories. We hear you speaking English, please, it's okay. Just tell us, this market that was completed but has not been opened for 2 years, that's all we want to know. What's the story? And when is it going to be open? This guy had come fully prepared with a presentation and all that. But what these people did is they said, no, we don't want to hear many stories, just this one.
Our pain point is market.
Is a market, just this market.
Yes.
3 months later, the market was open. I keep seeing these stories in macro levels everywhere. Now, when the only thing that gets these people to move is when they have actionable information, when they understand that information. So that is when we have understood what... Not even the 17 billion, because 17 billion is national. Let's speak of the part of that was in my ward. And then you just tell me, if this little amount was coming to my ward, we would have had a hospital, the one that we need. We are talking.
Would it help if the citizen, the Mwananchi we were speaking of, understood that this money we're speaking of is actually their money? The connection between the billions.
Fundamental, yes.
That's a very complicated thing also.
How complicated is it?
I go and ask citizens all the time that particular question. Between you and president, who's the boss? They say, of course, the president. I say, but why? He says, when he comes here now, we will stand. He is the one who has all the power. He has all the money. But whose money is it? It's his. It's not ours. If it was ours, we would know what to do with it. We know what to do with money. By the way, as Kenyans, we know what to do with money. So when you tell us that it is ours and we've never seen it, please. The thing that I'm trying to get us to understand here is that qua ground, vitu ni different. There's these things that we keep saying.
Why is it impossible for people to understand? Because if you look at our voting patterns, it more or less tells us that the so-called Mwananchi really understands their power. They do. It's the one thing they treasure. They know that with this, I can make a change.
No, they know that with this, my guy can get back in.
But now you see, this is where we live. Because if we're saying this person is disempowered, and yet you make a statement such as the one you make, then you're proving my point that he does understand that this thing gives them power.
To do what?
Now, that is where that's the crux of the matter. You see, you start from the known. Then you move on to these more complicated issues. Everything you've said, I completely agree with. The disconnect is I earn 300 shillings, that's mine. You tell me 1,000, you've removed me from a reality. How do I connect you to the 1,000, and then to the 10, and then to the 20? I would be more aggrieved and more incensed if somebody was wasting my money. It is not that they don't understand. In my mind, it is resignation. What we see is people who have resigned. They figured, this thing, let me not bother my head too much about it. I have more pressing issues to attend to. Let me focus on these ones.
So the thinking here is this 300 bob that I have earned, I sweat, I toiled, I got the 300.
I understand. It's my reality.
I spend it. I spend it at Babanani's shop. I buy. I spend it here. I pay for this. I go to the school. I pay kidogo money. This is how I balance my life, right?
Yes.
Anything beyond this is coming from Nairobi. Is coming from Kilifi, right?
Yes.
And it belongs to ni pesa ya Mngaro and ni pesa ya Ruto.
Yes.
It's coming. Mngaro has come. He's opening a project. Ametuletea maendeleo. Or Ruto was visiting the area and ametuletea. Pesa imetoka Nairobi ametuletea hapa. Right? So how do we then connect? Do you think, and this is just a random thought, do you think the fact that you are not, out of this 300 that you have earned, not a shilling is going as direct tax, then you don't connect with the fact that you actually removed some of your money to go into that pot that Mngaro and
it is
Ruto
not
are talking
impossible
about?
for people to understand these problems. It's just that I want to take you back to the statement I made a while back. People care more about what's happening home, commute to work.
Yes.
So if you tell this person, this road that is coming from your home to your work was supposed to have been fixed last year and the money was there, but it was not there. So please make sure you go to that public participation meeting and ask about that specific project because the money was there in the budget. They don't care how much money it was. No. Just that the money was there and it should have been Lami and it is not even Maram. That's a question that they can go and ask and they can even, it's something that we can get our head around. Don't tell me about the 17 billion. Don't tell me about 65 billion. Tell me this, that this 65 billion, when you disaggregate it, it was supposed to be this amount in my ward and it was supposed to be this thing. Can you see this window? From this road here to that Mama Nani's shop, there we were supposed to have done something. You see there, we were supposed to have done a borehole. If you tell me that, as that person earning the 300 bob per day, now you have connected with me because what you are saying is that I was supposed to have had a borehole here.
But I don't. Because?
Because
right.
What will happen is that I start asking some tough questions.
Is it, look, even as I'm having all these conversations, I've got to go back to that point of whose money was supposed to build the road. Does the citizen directly see that this is their money?
No.
Or is it the MCA who was going to do it? Sasa sababu unajua sisi tulikuwa tumepigia MCA wetu si wa chama ya governor, sasa sisi ndio maana tunadhulumiwa. Sasa basi uchaguzi ujao mjue vile mtafikiria nyinyi watu.
Yes.
Mjue vile mtajipanga maana.
That is actually the reality on the ground.
So then there's no direct connect. It's still feeling that whoever has the power of the purse strings is the one who is donating the money to you. The connection that it's your money is still not there.
And also the fact that it's not specific.
Yes.
When it is not specific, when we are talking about money that should have come here to this community and so on and so forth, it's still not specific. It's money, it's something, it's effervescent. But if you actually went and told me specifics, every time that I have been in a community where they had a discussion about specifics, they held their leaders to account. Every single time, without fail.
You know why I see a direct connection between people and the money?
Yeah.
Is, for example, in markets.
Yes.
Because traders at the market pay for the
license.
For the license on a daily basis.
Yes.
Then those ones are more organized and they're able to demand. Tunalipanga pesa hapa kila siku. Why is the toilet not working?
Why is there no water?
Why is the mulika mwizi not working?
Yes.
Why is the garbage not being collected?
Yes.
Silipi. So there's a direct connection.
Yes.
But beyond that now school and everything else,
or road
and hospital,
you feel like it's money we are going to grab money from Nairobi. We elected a very powerful and vocal person who's going to Nairobi to champion, and ametuletea hapa.
The thing that we have to do, in my view, is that we have to figure out how to empower our people, mostly through civic education. But trying to make sure that we get so specific that they can actually hold their leaders very specifically to account. Let's not care about the billions, because now that is mathematics. Just help me to understand this project, so that they start asking very specific questions.
That's what we want to have in the next hour. We'll continue this conversation and open the phone lines. Many people commenting even on social media. We'll be reading some of those comments. Kags is the executive director of the Open Institute. He's our guest. We've been having a debt conversation. What should we do next in our national discourse? 8 a.m. news time.